Welcome, everybody, to our City of Farmers Branch special meeting workshop, Tuesday, December 19th. Merry Christmas to all. So we're here this evening to talk about items B1 and B2. B1 is consider and discuss potential bond projects. We will start with that.
Thank you all, everyone, for being here today. My name is Jawaria Tareen. I'm Deputy City Manager, and I'm bringing back the discussion on May 2024 bond elections. As I bring this discussion, our main objectives for our presentation, our discussion today is to affirm our certificate of obligations for our dispatch center and approval of the projects that we are going to discuss during this presentation and allocation of funding per project. But before we get into our discussion and further details, let's take a look at our journey so far. We initiated this journey back earlier this year with our strategic planning. When we established our critical business outcome number 3, building and maintaining high quality public assets. We went through our budget process. During that budget process, you heard different presentations from a number of staff members where we learned our different needs that the city has. We understood there is a debt maturing, about 13 million. We started our discussion soon after the budget approval in October of 2023. We had discussions on approving and discussing and approving 5 million for COs. And we discussed our water infrastructure and our demo rebuild program. There was a discussion about getting our elections done in May 2024, and we were okay with COs for dispatch center. That brings us to our further discussion, the next step in our discussion, allocating projects and discussing projects under general obligation bonds of 8 million. So far, we have had our discussions on water infrastructure and demo rebuild program. But there are other programs that we have, other projects that we have that we are seeking funding for. The table here presents those projects. We have demo rebuild, and it presents the estimated cost. These are not the set amount. These are the proposal the city is asking for. Council has the ability to approve and disapprove. So we have demo rebuild. You have heard from staff member on different, you got presentation from our parks department on branch connection, Squire Park, water infrastructure from our public works department. These are the additional amounts, especially on Squire Park, branch connection that we need to complete our projects. If you have any projects, I'm going to stop this presentation here to initiate our discussion. I do have department representative present here to answer any of your questions.
Excuse me. Thank you, Jawaria. Thank you, Jawaria. Council, I think all of these items are very necessary items for our community. And we're here tonight to have just general roundtable discussion about your thoughts on all of these. So I don't want to voice my opinions at this point, but Councilman Roman, you want to go first, or would you?
Sure.
Okay.
So can you tell us, so for the Squire Park, I know we've already allocated a specific amount of funds for that through just the normal budget. What enhancements would this bring to the project?
So for that question, I'm going to refer to our parks representative, Maria Minter, to help us answer that question.
Maria Minter, Recreation Superintendent. So right now we have $1 million allocated towards the project. So 1.5 million would help with enhance with the splash pad, parking, sport court, and upgraded playground structure.
Okay. What about trees? Is that going to provide any enhancements there? Because I know there's that house that's it's on Richland that we've been trying to kind of make part of the park, but they won't sell. And so I think in one of the designs at some point I saw that there was like a barrier of trees to kind of separate that and create an enclosed, as much enclosed as possible with the trees from the outside to create a unique experience.
I don't have information on that with me. I can get back with you on that.
Okay.
I should have information on the playground and the structure enhancements, but I'll make a note and get back to you unless Mike has anything else he wants to
Yeah, I
add.
could probably add a little color to that. So the $1 million project would have been your splash pad and parking primarily. If you remember the images from probably 2 years ago or so, it was a custom-made playground structure. There was lighting elements, a lot of trees, like you said, screening, and then an art wall that sort of screened off some of the properties there. That's roughly a $4 million project today. If we did it take exactly to that level, we would scale down some of that, do some of that work in-house. So with $2.5 million, you'd probably find a somewhat similar version to what you saw, just not quite as custom in the playground elements and the lighting elements.
And then, can you talk a little bit about, for the $2 million amount for trails and sidewalks on Valwood, what that would entail?
So, thank you, Ryan.
Brian Sauter, Director of Public Works. It depends on the approach we take. There's a couple different things we could do. In order to put a trail down Valwood, we're very constrained on right of way. So we would have to take a lane one way or the other to fit a trail in there of any kind. To do a full reconstruct to include trail and sidewalk, I don't know that you would get very far for $2 million based on recent project we just bid and awarded. But there are other alternatives. We're looking at some things that City of Boulder has recently implemented. They have a mini Jersey barrier that they installed for their bike trail. They actually took a lane, they added these short Jersey barriers that have drainage pass-throughs, turned them into an artistic feature, and created a safe bike path through that means. The challenge will be the crossings for the driveways coming in and out of the homes. That's going to create a unique challenge in that area. So we're looking at options as to what we could do in that area. But as far as how far is $2 million going to get, what are you going to be able to accomplish with it? It's going to depend on what method we utilize or what method we could find.
Okay. Well, I had asked for the Squire Park thing to be put on here, as well as the trails and sidewalks, and just to share some insight on the trails and sidewalks piece. One of the things that I observed when I was campaigning was that street was very noisy, so it makes it difficult to really enjoy your space that you call home when there's just so much noise. It even made it difficult to just have a conversation with somebody, and even just dropping off signs and just going through the neighborhood seemed dangerous. It seemed like no matter how many stop signs you put, no matter how many flashing lights you put on the stop signs, people continue to race from one stop sign to the next to get to their final destination. And my understanding is there's been some issues to putting a stoplight right at B Street in Valwood. And so that's why that option wasn't ever pursued. And so just kind of thinking about it, it's like, well, what other alternative is there? And I know we're making great progress with speeding in Farmers Branch, but at some point I'm thinking to myself, we have a great staff right now, but we can't guarantee that. We are united in the thought that speeding is an issue, and we're devoting resources to addressing that. But councils change and priorities change as well. I mean, for example, if history is a lesson to us, going back to when we all had heard that don't speed in Farmers Branch, that was several years ago. And at some point that went away, and now we're getting concerned residents speaking up, telling us that they don't feel safe, that they're speeding in their neighborhoods and in major thoroughfares. So how can we provide a permanent solution, particularly in neighborhoods like the ones I've just described? It's got houses right on the front, so it's not like it's not like Valley View Lane, where when you drive through it, There is a piece that has homes on there but for the most part, there really aren't any. But that piece of Valwood going from B Street to Josie, it's got houses on both sides. It makes it difficult for anybody. I even watch people trying to get into their vehicles when they park on the curb, and they had to very carefully look to make sure that cars aren't going to fly through, and then very quickly hustle into their car, unlock it, run inside, and close it really quickly. I probably wouldn't live there for very long if I purchased a house there, if I had to deal with that on a daily basis. And I know that there have been residents who've lived there for many, many years who've just been accustomed to that. But why force somebody to live in that condition? And so with this bond, where we have an opportunity to be in a debt neutral situation, I'm thinking that this might be a unique opportunity to address some of these concerns that I've learned about when I was campaigning. Not only that, but I took the liberty of keeping an eye on this specific issue to see if it was just me or if other people had brought this to my attention through the comprehensive plan process. If you recall, there was a point where there was a focus group that explored that piece in the city. And so I remember that focus group saying it was really dark. They said that cars speed through there. They talked about they felt unsafe, and they talked about how noisy it was as well. So affirming all of the things that I had already kind of perceived on my own. And then it ended up in the comprehensive plan, and it was something that I specifically asked about, and they indicated that it was going to be something that was going to be included in the comprehensive plan. Furthermore, I went back and I looked at, well, does this align with our strategic outcomes? Because every year in the first quarter of the year, we sit down as council and talk about what are the goals of the city. And I went through and I looked and I said, okay, well, does this align with some of the things that we've already discussed? And it seems to. It just aligns with critical business outcome number 3, which is to plan for, build, and maintain high quality public assets, as well as the critical business outcome number 4, to support recreation in Farmers Branch. And so with the expansion of a sidewalk, it'll be able to connect into that B Street trail that's already been expanded. And just from my experience of living in a neighborhood that has expanded sidewalks, I can tell you that they are definitely used by everybody frequently. And I think that'd be a nice feature for that neighborhood as well. So those are just some of my thoughts on why I feel very strongly in support of that one. And I'll kind of pause there and before I jump on the next one.
Can I ask maybe as a follow-up to that? Because I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. So with respect to Valwood, you believe that people are having a hard time getting in their cars, even though the street has been narrowed to allow for a parking lane versus having 2-lane street. So what can be done to slow traffic down between, say, Josie and Webb Chapel? That is a problem section. The other problem section of that is between Josie and B Street. So we can certainly ask police to step up their patrol of those areas, and hopefully if enough people get tickets, they might start changing their mindset. But you said something that I thought was pretty important. I think you mentioned that I'll paraphrase, but they were conditioned to accept faster traffic. And that's sort of the way we see traffic on Valley View somewhat, because cars are going so fast. We're trying our best to slow traffic down, but the people who live on Valley View between Webb Chapel and Josie are conditioned to traffic going fast in the area. It would not make sense to put speed bumps on Valley View, but might that be an option to consider on Valwood in certain areas? It's more residential. It's not as commercial of a street as, say, Valley View. So I realize the fire department has final say on that, but is that something that could be entertained as a discussion item to possibly be a solution to some of this?
And I guess my only pushback to that is if it was a actual solution, why has it not been done? Because, I mean, we've had, if I go back to two council people before me, one person actually lived on that street. And I would be very doubtful that that representative did not bring up the option of speed bumps in that neighborhood.
I don't believe that I've heard speed bumps brought up on Valwood since I've been here. Do you recall? We started about the same time, so I'm just not recalling. So I don't know. But we're here today having a discussion about today, and so if that makes sense to bring that up in the realm of options, we should at least be bringing it up, and then talk with the chief, and then consider what other things. I don't know, Councilwoman, you.
I'd like to see a diagram, honestly, because $2 million, if my understanding from Ryan is correct, it's just not going to get as far. I don't feel like maybe we need to, it's not all in and fix it, or let's wait until we can be. Because if we're going to have to take a lane away, but we've already done that basically to slow it down, how is that going to help the other side? Because that's only a one side issue. Does that make sense? That fixes it for one side. It doesn't fix it for the other side.
Well,
So that's what I think I just need a visual of how we can make that work.
I think it might help this have a visual. I know on Valwood between Webb Chapel and Hartside, I believe it's Hartside, there was a lane on each side that was taken away, so cars can park on each side. Can't take any more.
Right.
Okay. Now, further west, that's a different discussion. So, Ryan, you got.
You're talking about speeding, and there's been multiple hundreds of thousands of studies about speed, especially in towns similar to ours. The only proven effective method of reducing traffic and changing people's behaviors regarding speed is to reduce lanes and increase awareness. You do that by adding on-street parking. You do that by adding barriers. You force people to pay attention to what's around them. If you give them a wide open space, they see freedom and they fly. If you encroach on them and force them to pay attention to what's happening, they naturally slow down. Speed bumps, they've been installed here before. They turn into a maintenance nightmare, both on keeping them updated and keep them intact, and then the damage to city vehicles as well. They've never been very effective. People see them as basically a ramp, especially kids. They usually want to see if they can jump more or less. And they experience that on Farmers Branch Lane right now. We get it all the time. But honestly, the most effective way is to cause an encroachment on the lane of traffic, which is unfortunate because it does cause restriction on traffic, and it can cause increased backup at certain locations. But ultimately, that's the end result: is you create a slower method of travel, and it's a safer environment for the people that live in the area, especially in a residential neighborhood. As far as adding one side or the other, to properly do this, you would want to pull a lane from each side. So you would have essentially, you could trail on one side, bike lane on the other. You could add on-street parking one side, add a trail beyond the on-street parking.
So functionally, how far is $2 million going to get with that then?
Just depending on what we do with it. If we don't have to address a ton of stormwater issues. We're gonna get a little bit further. But just as a point of reference, this piece out here on Denton Drive, you're running from Pike Street to essentially just past the Grove. But we're also adding a ton of stormwater all the way to the creek to address the stormwater issues in there. That little section right there, just paving, stormwater trail and sidewalk, you're looking at about 1.8 million for that short stretch. So it doesn't go far, but that is also a big road. Denton Drive is a huge road. It's a huge undertaking. You get a little bit further on Valley. It's not as wide of a road. You wouldn't have to do as much reconstruction all the way across either. But feasibly, 2 million is not going to get you all that far with that type of redesign. And to be honest with you, a redesign with some type of bike lane barrier system is probably what it would take to make it right. But that's information I can get back to you. And once I review the study from Boulder, this is kind of a case study for the protected bike lane right now. And that seems to be the cheapest, easiest, cleanest method that you can use right this second to create those lanes. And once I've had an opportunity to study and review what they've done, I can actually absolutely report back to you all with that.
Brian, I'm sorry, before you sit down, if two things. One, could you explain, you call it a Jersey barrier, just for, I mean, we can look it up, but could you give us a synopsis of what a Jersey barrier is?
If you drive down I-35, you see the big tall concrete barrier in the middle of the highway there that you try not to hit. That's Jersey. Those are called Jersey barriers.
So they're just the road separators that we're all familiar with on the highways.
And the ones that they use for the bike trails are between 18 and 24 inches tall. They're much shorter.
So if pontificating ahead, if we were to use such, we've already addressed the concerns about ingress and egress for our residents that are living on both sides. We also have on-street parking dedicated on both sides, at least from what I can see. And we've all been there, and so we're looking at different spaces. How would such a barrier concept, just in theory, being placed in there allow for that parking, or does it detract the parking? And that's the question that I'm really seeking. I'm along the same veins as Tina is. Visuals help
Sure.
1,000%. But if we put a barrier in, does it take away the on-street parking, or depending on how it's laid out?
It does depend on how it's laid out. It does not have to.
Okay.
We have an option over there because we do have the extra lane where there's already the on-street parking. So we could actually take that additional lane, make that a one-lane thoroughfare from B Street to Josie. Let's take that area because it's the narrowest of the areas. Put your Jersey barrier in. Where it comes to the homes for ingress and egress of the drives, you would want to roll that Jersey barrier in and constrict the bike lane, allowing a space for people to back essentially into what was a bike lane at that point. By pushing the bikes in, it's narrowing their lane, giving an area for you to back out of your driveway that's unimpeded, not in traffic, and you would have plenty of room to leave and move forward into the flow of traffic.
Right.
And then if you have that additional lane that's also set aside for parking, line for parking, now you're pushing everybody out. There's a lot of different configurations you can use by using those many barriers. It would just, we would have to look at it and really design it properly, but that would be the gist of it, is creating an area of ingress egress that's out of traffic for the homeowners there, and then allowing parking outside of the Jersey barrier, giving an extra buffer for cyclists and pedestrians.
One more question, if I could. So none of the discussion that we've had so far seemingly includes widening the existing sidewalks. We're all discussing, correct me if I'm wrong, we're all discussing trails within the existing street right-of-way. And I just want to clarify that. And so we're all working from the same understanding. Is that how you
perceive this? Okay.
The widening of the existing sidewalks, another pretty big expense. Plus, we would have to extend the sidewalks out into the roadway because of the existing utilities, which pose a complete
Yeah.
another issue.
Again, we just have the complications of working in the spaces that are afforded to us here
Right.
with an amount that is challenging to make it a quick fix solution. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, but I think we all agree that $2 million is not going to go very far into addressing this. It's a start, but I think it's going to be a really dedicated, longer term, determined project or program, as Ben and I discuss projects and programs in the space here, of really moving towards how can we address these problem areas. And then the challenge we all have is determining what are the problem areas, what are the ones that are most in need of this. And I don't disagree that this is a challenge. It's been a challenge for the entire time that I've lived in the city since 1989. So I'm familiar with this stretch. So anyway, it's a long-winded answer or a long-winded inquiry, if you will. There's a lot to do here and not just a one-time expenditure. So thank you, Ryan. I appreciate your time.
Part of Ryan's solution is it's a way of using existing infrastructure and leveraging it to have an effect on the current traffic, because issuing tickets is reactive, proactive is the infrastructure that guides the flow of traffic. And so there are ways to do that. And so depending on how council approaches this, if we move forward in this way, there's always ways we can pulse how it would work first, because Public Works has a whole bunch of barriers. So we can reset and see before we actually invest too far into this. And as long as the wording is correct on the proposition, which our bond council will help us with, we can talk about, there's always a need for trails. There's never going to be enough money for trails. But knowing this is a priority for it, and they're pulling up an example picture so you can see it, because that's the one from Boulder. So it's using the existing street. So you see how they repurposed it, a much cheaper solution, because we're having to use existing infrastructure to redo the whole infrastructure, drainage, everything. See how it's got the open space underneath so the water can flow? It would be millions of dollars for hundreds of feet. This way allows us to use existing structure. But with council's direction, you would tell us how you want us to move forward with these ideas. I wouldn't suggest going forward immediately. I would suggest having an intentional approach to the lane redesign, working with our residents there as well, since it will impact them, and seeing does it have the desired effect we're after, but knowing that there's always going to be needs for more trails. There always will be in the city, and there's always going to be an appetite for it. So funding is always looked for in that area. The west side has it naturally because it's a newer development, so they have trails pre-programmed, where existing neighborhoods don't have that same luxury. And again, when you see multiple lanes, it's unfortunate. The speed humps are one that usually fire, especially on a main thoroughfare, is usually going to be hesitant to say they're comfortable having in there. And there's mixed reviews on speed humps. You could do the rumble strips, which is a different one. There's approaches, but eventually folks normalize it. So when you're going to the airport, they have them right, and you go fast at first. Eventually you're going to slow down, but you're still probably approaching it, maybe with 20 over, maybe 10 over, maybe go on the speed limit. But it takes you a little bit to adjust to those. And once you normalize them, you're normalized. And we see a lot of the speeding happens to be sometimes folks that are in Farmers Branch a lot. Maybe they live here. You'll see that when we start doing more neighborhood policing. It's our residents that sometimes get those tickets in general mind, or even our employees. So it's one just for y'all's consideration. This is how I'd recommend approaching it, would be using our current portable infrastructure to try it out, see if it has the intended effect. Because I'd hate to say, we're going to do this and sorry, deal with it. We can say, we can study it, we can look at it, we can have police watch it, we can have Public Works watch it and see what happens. But Ryan and I were out looking at something else today, and we had 3 people run a red light right in front of us. And it was egregious running the red light. Like, I have a green arrow and they're just 1, 2, and one's a really big truck. So that would have been a bad day for us. And they just ran it. So it's those infrastructure components. And when our streets were designed, they were designed straight and efficient, where they talk about when you design streets, you make them weave a little bit because it slows people down, because you change the way the lanes move. It forces you to pay attention. So these are hybrid solutions, efficient when it comes to the budget, that could have some of the same effects, and also creates more walkable, bikeable, stroller pathways for our community and our residents that are on a very busy street as well. So just food for thought.
Councilman Jackson, we hadn't heard from you.
So Ryan, do we have current infrastructure repair needs on this stretch of road?
Yes.
But if we were going to address those infrastructure needs, we wouldn't be doing it with this bond money. We'd be doing it from other funds like CIP or, right?
We have sections of Valwood that are identified for CIP repairs and future projects
Mm-hmm.
for water and wastewater.
Okay, so it makes sense to me that we could try to address some of these things using the CIP because we got to tear a road up anyways. That would be, killing two birds with one stone per se, as opposed.
We try to attempt that when we do our CIP
Right,
projects.
right.
Depending on how extensive it is.
It just seems like $2 million. If I get it, trails and sidewalks would be nice for the neighborhood, and we could also address some other issues. But $2 million that we know is not going to go very far to address an issue, speeding seems like a lot of money. I'd say we address the speeding through law enforcement, not sidewalks and trees and barriers and such. So I'm supportive of trails and sidewalks, but I don't think this is the one. I don't think this is it. The amount of money seems like a lot. It's not going to go very far.
I would agree. Excuse me. I would agree with Councilman Jackson. We've got two different issues here. The need for trails and sidewalks and possibly something to address accessibility on Valwood. And the other being speed, which is law enforcement issue. I do think that we will be able to get a handle on that in due time once we have motorcycles in place. They're going to make a difference all over the city. It's a proven fact with cities that have used them. So we have that. It does help me to see what these barriers or samples of these things look like. I wouldn't want to do something. I don't want to. I don't want to
think it's
not
attractive.
support this bond because of one particular item. But what I do want to do is have options in my mind that we can express to residents, especially in the affected area. Hey, here's some things that we're considering. What are your thoughts? And gauge them. There may be some who are all for something that Ryan just showed us. There may be some people that are against it. There's going to be some people who don't even understand language barrier, whatnot, but we need to communicate with those people because they still need to be able to have access, full access to the street. And I'm in my mind, I'm wondering, okay, how does somebody back out of their driveway and either not hit that barrier or hit a car that's parked in front of their house? So, but that's another discussion. You can educate me later. So that's my comment.
So I'm looking at some of these homes, particularly on the stretch of Valwood between Josie and B Street. And the driveways generally look like they're 2.5 cars deep. I'd be curious to know how many of these homes have converted their garages. And so they don't have garages. So took away a parking space there.
Where are you again? Valwood?
Valwood between B and Josie. There are some homes that have added driveways so they can not have to park on the street. If I were looking for a home, I might not buy a home on the street if I was so concerned about getting in and out of my car on the street. We've already taken a lane away and given them some space, but maybe there's a more creative approach, perhaps in allowing some permitting for additional driveway. They can pay for their own driveway if they don't want to park on the street where it's more dangerous. They can park on some added driveway that they pay for. If they're going to have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 cars parked at their residence, but $2 million in a bond to try and create more space and slow traffic down, and still it's not going to be able to do all of that. Just doesn't seem like the right path.
Ryan, can you maybe elaborate a little bit on the scope of work that would take place on Valwood in the affected area, I guess between Josie and B?
Depends on which direction we go. If we're using existing infrastructure, can you pull up?
Oh, very good.
Just drop your street view anywhere in there, Jordan. So this side right here, we actually have a little bit more room where you could technically extend a sidewalk and push Sharrows probably further out into this area and create an on-street parking lane if you wanted to, by using the existing infrastructure and adding those shorter Jersey barriers. But as you can see, one of the challenges is going to be where these driveways fall and how close they are to one another. So you're going to have a gap, or you're going to have to use shorter Jersey barriers with a gap in between them to allow these people access out of their driveway.
So,
And if those Jersey barriers are only 18 to 24 inches, they're going to be constantly running over them, backing into them. And the pictures we saw from Colorado had no driveways.
That's on a main thoroughfare.
so, Councilman, so to that point also, go back. There you go. What if somebody says, I don't want that ugly thing in front of my house? Then are we going to have them and then have big gaps? You know, I can see residents maybe not wanting something like that in front of their house
Right.
just because of the aesthetic. And so I think
The other option would be on this particular side, you would essentially take out this piece right here. This would all turn into sidewalk trail, pushing on-street parking further out. But in these longer stretches, they would be lined off because you wouldn't be able to park right there in front of these, directly in front of those homes.
and that might present a problem also, because we know in some of these cases, they have more vehicles than what they were built for originally. Some only have one car garage. I don't think there's many that have a two. They may not be able to get all the vehicles that they own, because if they have, 2, 3, 4 people in the household that work and they all have vehicles, then they certainly can't fit all those in the driveway. So
The other option
it
stays like it is. This would push further out. Your trail would come further out. You would fight the same issues that you're fighting now, getting in and out. It would just be one lane of traffic that you're fighting with against parked cars.
one lane each way,
One lane each way.
and those lanes would be closer together. So I guess maybe that's something I would want to hear from Chief McCoy and get his opinion on that. I'm not trying to belabor this point, but I think anytime you're pushing vehicles closer together, what does that do?
Slows them down.
Most people would slow down, I would think, but
There's a lot of different things we can do right there. You have an entire median also that can be taken into consideration during a redesign. It's just. the
But that takes us
possibilities are
above, well above 2 million. Well above 2 million to do that, that median.
I couldn't hear you.
That takes us well above 2 million to
That's
take
the
the, to
median.
take the median and use it.
You're
How did you get
expanding
it?
the project.
How did you get at the $2 million number?
2 million was brought to me.
Okay.
When we were discussing the trails and how to split this, the question was, how far can we go with it? What can we accomplish with 2 million? Right. Realistically, just being blunt and direct, it's not going to go far. That's, no matter how you go, it's not going to go far. There's just a lot of infrastructure that has to be addressed when you're installing these bike trails and these lanes. So, and in a different area of town, it might be an option, but right there on a busy thoroughfare, the dynamics change because of the constraints. But I absolutely see the need there too.
But this isn't the only area for a need, that has a need like that. We have a lot of different areas, but, I'd be more supportive of putting the $2 million somewhere else. That's more priority need.
Need base. versus-
Well,
yeah.
I would think maybe at this point, we're almost a little premature in trying to address this and maybe shoehorn, if you will, and that might be a bad word, but shoehorn this particular fix into this problem. If we pass a bond, Ryan, and there are items earmarked, is there a time limit on how long we can just sit on that before we take action?
Tammy.
Huh?
Tammy question. How long can we sit on the money if we pass a bond and we earmark it for a project? What's our timeline?
There is a timing that we are trying to accomplish to keep the rate level.
Okay.
We can,
I'm not
Issue
asking a
the
rate, I'm not
bond.
asking a rate question. I'm just asking in general, you pass a bond, do you have a certain amount of time before you have, till you start those projects? In general.
let me, oh, sorry, let me get up.
Okay. Here.
So when we were trying to keep the debt INS rate level, we kind of played with when we were going to sell certain bonds. So the COs for NTEC, we were going to hold off on selling those. And the whole calculation is based on your principal debt payments and interest payments. So what I'm saying is you can kind of play a little bit with when you sell the bonds and start having to make those principal payments on them and still kind of keep that debt level ratio level,
Okay.
the INS portion.
Then let me ask another question then. So maybe this is something that would need to stand on its own on a separate bond at a different time. Okay. And if that's the case, then we know that we could have a bond election down the road for Project X. Can you start or collect some funds now for Valwood and then have an additional or a separate bond election at another time to do phase 2 of a project?
If you're thinking it's just a year delay, we can go ahead, sell the bonds, set up the whole debt and interest schedules, keeping our INS rate level. And then we just earn interest on that cash. Kind of like we've been doing with the multi-sports facility. And then if it's a year down the road, you've gotten organized and you're ready to go with the project, then that's what you do. But if it's something where you're still questioning, what are we going to do? That may be an issue with bond counsel. They're going to want to know more specifically on the ballot wording.
Okay.
And one other thing I wanted to just mention, I know Jawari might have come to this point, but anything on the ballot that doesn't get passed, we are prohibited from issuing any other debt for 3 years. So.
Non-voter supported debt,
Correct.
sorry, COs. I just want to clarify on that one.
COs
You can't
are-
just go and issue after the public has voted it down. And this may be something to consider Wells Council. You have a citywide master trail plan that has a schedule of implementation. We're already behind on it. It was adopted in 2015. So when I say there's an appetite for trails and connection points, there's a whole plan that's been vetted, proved, adopted that's waiting out there. Just there's never enough, as Ryan said, there's never enough money to catch up. Valwood's on there as part of the trail thing, but there's a whole list of other elements as well. That may be another approach to look at as well, is can it be part of that because council, there's gonna be multiple feedback loops. Even if it's a put on the ballot, the voters still have to approve it. The projects still have to come back to council. And so that's the one thing to consider as well. The projects in their final form take a little bit of time to mature and vet, and there's always those additional feedback loops. So you'll have to issue the debt, then you'll have to approve the projects, then you'll have to, they're capital projects.
Understood. So I guess what I was thinking in my mind was, okay, can this be broken down into little bits? Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We don't have that information right now, but is there something that could be done with the $2 million that sort of works us towards our ultimate goal? I don't know that we have set an ultimate goal. So that's a whole nother conversation. And I don't know if we can have that quick to get this, bring everybody to a comfort level to approve spending or going out for bond on $2 million at this point. If we knew, such as the Trails Plan, what that is, then we're just adding to that earmarked for a specific area, let's say, and that fits into a plan. We just haven't gotten there yet. So that's why I don't want to hold this up because of our uncertainty of how to proceed. I think we know we've got a path in place already. We're adding to that. And then we still have time to work out maybe the next phase of it or the street program, and then coordinate with CIP projects also. So maybe we can attain greater efficiency in spending our dollar.
So to me, it sounds like we're generally in support of doing something in that area. It's just not through this mechanism because there's a lot of questions, a lot of unknowns, and there's just not enough money. What I'm hearing.
No, I don't think that's what I was saying. I think we're generally supportive, but while we have the Trails Plan, this could help add to that, but these funds would be earmarked for this specific area. So when we get to that point, we already have those dollars, right?
Just helping the plan move forward. It's got an implementation schedule. It's got short-term, midterm, long-term. It's got striping. It's got trailheads. It's sort of even the sharrows we talked about on the west side over there by the nature preserve and the cyclist, regardless of debated efficiency or not, or they're effective or not, but it's still symbolic gestures to our cyclists that, hey, there are sharrows, please feel free to use the roads for cycling. And so that's part of the Trail Master Plan as well. So there's a lot of pieces to it. And it's just, again, finding funding for those in a very competitive budget environment. We have public safety, which we could argue this is part of, infrastructure, which this is part of, neighborhoods, amenities, kind of fits in all four buckets. So,
Yeah. And everything that's in this basket, if you will, I think is very worthwhile and needed in our city. So, if anything, I wish we had more money going to the neighborhood revitalization and rebuild project, but we are where we are. So that can be discussed at a future date.
and with any of these projects, the staff will show any of these projects could always use more. Squire Park has a base amount in it right now, but to take that next level, that's why this amount is in there as well. Trails and sidewalks could always use more. Water infrastructure could use hundreds of millions of dollars. These are just ways to edge those programs, nudge them forward, and make some symbolic gestures into the budget as well, while keeping the debt service part of the budget neutral and flat for the future as well. And again, these are just council staff's here to answer any questions. However you would like to move the numbers, zero them out, put it all in one.
So we're doing, okay, because I know we talked about the trails and sidewalks, but Squire Park. So basically you're asking for 1.5 more than what we already budgeted.
Correct. That was.
And when we were at TML, we stopped and we pointed and said, what's that worth right there? And even with the better pump, it was 900,000. And so we were like, okay, that's nice. That works. So I would argue that if the trails and sidewalks needs more money, maybe we get that money from Squire.
I'll ask the parks team.
What
first.
would 3.5 get us? would it still make, would it make any impact on that?
If I was gonna get you a lot further than 2 million, it would just depend on which design route we go, or we use, and which area of Vinewood we focus on. So we focus on B Street to Josie. It's a little bit more complicated in that area because the property constraints are much tighter. Or do we go from Josie to Webb Chapel and focus on that area, which is a little bit cleaner area, a little bit wider street, a little more real estate to work with, not as many utility constraints.
So if we choose an area, then it could go feasibly fix that area, and then we go phase 1, phase 2, phase 3.
I'm just going to say something. I just got a text from Shane. He clarified that on 2015 plan, even though that's there, they're currently working on active transportation plan that will refine our pedestrian and cycling plan more. So those projects will come back more enhanced. And it still needs public input and evaluation from council and public. So it's in works right now.
I need to see better, I need a better visual on what the options are. I don't feel like the Jersey walls that you're talking about, I don't feel like that's an option. I don't know where are people going on these trails and sidewalks to and from.
There is some Strava data out there that shows a lot of use in different areas of the city. I don't have, I believe Kim Horn has access to the Strava data that we can actually get hold of and present to you and show you where the active areas are for the pedestrians and cyclists, which is really good information because you can see where they're using these trails and where they're using areas that don't have trails, which is actually pretty impressive. The amount of people that ride Bellevue on weekends is extreme. So that might also be a good piece of information to share with council.
I think the mayor hit on an interesting perspective, and I think it still lends support to improvement in this area. Is if we were to put this into these $2 million for what we have up here is trails and sidewalks in Vinewood. If we dedicate $2 million of this bond to trails and sidewalks, we do have the master plan that was drafted in 2015. At the time, I was sitting on Parks and Rec, and it was $24 million. I remember that number specifically, and I looked over to Mike Masberg to implement that. We didn't have 24 million, but we did end up with a bond election, if you may remember, of about $7 million in order to initiate that. So the money is there. I'm suggesting that, to your point, to your need in that community, is that if we did allow for this $2 million to be spent there, it would be in those coffers. And this is where I agree with the mayor, that it would be there for those type of projects, whatever they may be, because we want to have, and the mayor and I were just sidebarring, you want the community to be invested in the improvement and not that you're just forcing something in to make an adjustment. So I'd like to propose that if we do consider this as a group, that the $2 million go into that trail portion. And then simultaneously, we have talked about the need for, traffic, modification, if you will. That's another bucket, if you will. And I hope we could separate those. That's just my Dave Merritt's personal approach to that, because we do have other issues. We've been alluded to CIP programs. We've talked about police, managing the traffic situation as well. But I think it's a investment in the longer term connectivity of trails and sidewalks that has been an idea for a number of years in our community, and we just haven't found a way to fund it totally. But this is an incremental effort to go forward in a specific area, and I'm dedicating that it's not okay. We have that and we'll spend it in area A or area B. I'm suggesting that we dedicate that space whether it's from B to Josie or B to Webb Chapel, that's where we dedicate the improvements of trails and sidewalks. And as we've heard, we could then hear more about what could be and would be the way to reach those objectives and goals. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Oh, good idea.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments on this part of it? Okay.
So what I hear is, excuse me, on these projects, trails and sidewalks, there is an improvement. We're doing trails only, leaving active transportation plan still out there because it's coming forward.
Jawari, we haven't had a chance to review it or have
Okay.
counsel. It's too far ahead of this discussion, so it'll have
Okay.
to be considered at a later time.
Okay. So we're good with the numbers though on the projects.
Yeah.
Because I had an exercise, that was a very good discussion. I had an exercise for the council members where we were going to get into allocating numbers. And Tammy was all ready to help me.
Well, I'm not okay with the numbers.
Okay.
So, and I still have a question about the branch connection. That's phase 2, correct? 2 million is for phase 2.
That's correct.
And assuming this goes through, phase 2 is completed basically immediately thereafter phase 1.
If it's approved, yes, we would, and we met with, the construction company, Rodick, earlier this week or yesterday, and we talked about that. If this is approved, they'll still be on site at the time, and so it would just continue. That's the general consensus.
Okay. I'm struggling with the phase 2 and the Squire. I really feel like we've allotted money, and that's coming. And I think that those are important things, but people's safety, children's safety on streets is more important. And Valwood is a big street. And I understand that the police can and will engage in that, but that's only part of the problem. And if we really want to move forward in our trails and our master plan, I feel like maybe that's, because the infrastructure issue is, as Ryan said, is huge. It's huge. And that's for everybody as well. And that's kind of how I feel about it. We've got to do what's right for the majority. Everybody, as I had said earlier this year, you got to give a little to get a little. That's why I brought Squire Park up. But I don't think it needs another 1.5 million. So that's how I feel.
Go ahead.
For the branch connection, you need to remind me, because I put a note in here and I don't know where I got this number from, but we need 2.75 million to finish the branch connection. Is that right?
If it's okay with Jawari, I could pull up the
Please.
presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Please do.
just in case.
'Cause
I might get some questions.
Yeah, my focus is I don't want to spend money on branch connection and it not be done. I think we need to spend money on branch connection and finish it the way that we've planned to finish the branch connection. And if that means we take $500,000 away from Squire Park, then I think that's the right thing to do. Because it sounds like $1.5 million to Squire Park may be a bigger number than what we need.
Correct. So let me go to this page right here.
Is
So you'll
that-
see here's the total alternates is 1.4,
Mhm.
and then the FF&E is 450. So almost $2 million to finish it out, and that would include the alternates. And if just to refresh everybody's memory, let me pull this up.
Okay.
And then
Could
here's-
you go back to the
Yeah.
previous slide?
Sure.
Just
Okay.
so remember,
That's
we
right.
afforded that 600,000 to get to the 2.7.
The bond is
So it's
1.4 and the
right.
450.
The real question, Maria, is does the 450,000 address enough of the FF&E for finish out? And so therefore, we're looking at, 1.857, and you got a little bit of change to get to 2 million. Does that buffer address all the needed FF&E
Yes,
to finish this out?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
all right.
Does that help? Jim?
Yep, it does. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm sorry, just want to add, that's today's cost too. So
Right.
just, we never know what things are gonna do in the future, so just
Yeah.
add that in
Mhm.
there. And then there was, just full transparency, there was a secondary option with the outdoor space that we're not touching. So
Right.
this does not include the exterior of the building or the outdoor space.
Yeah, there was something about a fire pit or some, we're not doing that. Right, agree.
I'm glad you brought that up, Mike. That's a good point. So yes, it takes care of the interior at today's prices.
So just to make clear or sure that we're all on the same page, I want Ben to make a comment here.
So these are all in addition to funding for the branch connection at Squire Park. They already have funding in the budget for them. So you've already approved the branch connection. That's moving forward, but at the base level. It doesn't have the alternates or the enhancements for phase two. Squire Park is at a base level for a splash pad. There are infrastructure needs that go with that. It's not just the splash pad. So Parks was asked for both of these, what would it take to realize that full level? And that's where you see these numbers coming from. And every department affirmed those numbers move the needle forward on it. Some of them, there's not a finish line. Infrastructure, even when we get it replaced today, 30 years from now, it comes back. It's sort of, it is what it is. And then you look at trails and sidewalks. Sidewalks are always going to be deteriorating, just like streets. It's the cousins, right? So it's one or the other. They're always going to have work that's needed. But sidewalks that were built a long time ago aren't trails that we expect to see in neighborhoods for walkability today, or those connection points. That's what the connectivity part of the Trails Master Plan is. So it's just one of those for y'all to know is there's money for the Squire Park. There's money for the branch connection. There's not money to get it to the levels that have been shown and saying, hey, that's the dream. That's where it could be. Here's a mechanism to make that a reality. Council, what would you like to do is what it comes down to. And you can move any of these numbers. I mean, and again, we don't have to use it all either. It's completely up to the council. We just want to make sure it's a rare opportunity when you have debt rolling off. And again, to reinforce, we do anticipate, unless something catastrophic happens in the economy, there will be another tax rate reduction on the operation side of the budget coming forward to council next year. And Farmers Branch's property values, I mean, it's really early, but things are looking stable for us today, despite the news out there, the sky might fall one day. That's every day. It's for now, we have to go as what is, and it's looking good for Farmers Branch.
Thank you, Ben. I think it's really important. We're all here to help better our community and better each of our sub-communities that are around the city. And there are some areas that obviously haven't had money spent on them in quite a long time, if ever since they were built. And I believe when we invest in the communities the way we are, and especially like Squire Park, that is going to help some of our other efforts to change that area for the better. We've invested heavily in Builders of Hope, and those new homes coming to the area are going to help that area. Squire Park will help that area. The general economy of Farmers Branch is going to help that area, and so I feel like it all goes hand in hand. It's because to me, it's very hard to break out one single piece and focus on one single piece. I'd like to see us do the right thing that will help our city overall. And I realize that none of this is cheap. That is for sure. Yes, sir.
Mayor, one other question. I do recall when we walked Valwood for the comprehensive plan, and we went off Valwood into one of the streets and the sides. It's really dark in those neighborhoods. It's dark over near Squire Park. So as we think about these amounts, allocating these amounts to some of those improvements, is there room to add some lighting in the neighborhoods beyond the central areas, like right there around Square Park? Is there room in this number to add lighting on the next couple of streets?
Is that an encore question?
Ryan, if we wanted to add some street lighting in some of these neighborhoods, how would that process work, and what would the financials be?
We would
In general.
plan together for the areas that we want to light. We'd have to take some measurements and determine whether or not the power is available. We would submit that plan to Encore. They would then give us a quote for the construction of the infrastructure needed to power the lights. And then they would also give us what our monthly subscription cost is per light. So it would just be a plan that we'd have to present to Encore. As far as cost goes, Hallie, that vary greatly. We did one 6 months ago that cost us about $3,800. We've done another one that cost us $16,000. So it just depends on where it's at and what's required to get the power to it.
Is there not an option where there's just a freestanding pole with a solar panel and LED light that's got a nice little neighborhood lighting to it as opposed to traditional?
There are those options out there. I've actually had a discussion about that earlier this week with sustainability, talking about maybe doing some type of small program to see how those work. The biggest issue is trying to get those in areas that don't have trees, because they have to have a lot of direct sunlight to maintain power through the night. That's been the biggest complaint I've found.
Yeah.
Where is that?
For solar powered lights, like the pedestrian lighting,
Yeah.
solar powered, if they do not receive enough sunlight throughout the day, they normally don't last through the night.
Okay.
They have to have like 7 or 9 hours of direct sunlight for 16 hours of lighting, and it's not often that you get 7 or 9 hours of direct sunlight, especially in the city. So you have to find an area that's not covered in shade. There's a new technology that's improving right now that supposedly has a better panel that absorbs more power, has a better battery pack built into it that can last a lot longer with shorter periods of sun, but it hasn't been sent out to the public yet. So we are looking at that also.
Okay.
For solar powered options for pedestrian lighting. They have some street lights that are available right now. We don't use any of them in North Texas that I've found yet.
Okay.
So I'm generally supportive of the $2 million for the branch connection and the 1.5 for Squire Park, of course. I think what makes a city unique is its amenities that are available for the residents, and I think particularly for branch connection, just from my experience and advising people on their finances, one of the things that I always ask people is when they're getting ready to retire is, what are you going to do? And I think the branch connection offers that. What are you going to do? Because there are statistics that show that depression rates increase whenever you don't have that daily interaction. You're not going to work. You're not interacting with people, and that's a really dangerous statistic. And so I think the branch connection offers the opportunity for people to socialize, have activities, and enjoy their life here in Farmers Branch. I think the Squire Park does something equally, and I don't want to just check a box. I want it to be something that the residents there are proud of, that they feel some ownership to it. I was doing some research and looking through some empirical studies about some of the things that parks offer, and it was more than what I initially thought. I thought it'd just be a nice place, but it's also a place to build community and to gather. And that's particularly important in that neighborhood because they don't really have a place. I mean, there's Squire Park, but no one really gathers there. The last gathering that we had there was for National Night Out in 2021. And we had over 100 people, maybe almost 200 people that showed up. I know there was a lot of staff members there, and it was a surprise. And I think for me, the takeaway from that was there is an appetite for that community to gather. They just want to do something. They just want to have a place to be able to do it with their families and build that sense of camaraderie in their neighborhood. And I think they'll really be proud of something if we really invest the money that it takes to be able to build that out. I'm not arguing to build it to the level of Hoya Park, but if we can take some of the successes that we've seen in the media and the attention that it's brought. I mean, we've been on the news constantly about Hoya Park. Again, Squire Park is something very different from it, but we are first and foremost a city and a park. And I think that specific branding implies that we build our parks and maintain them to a specific standard and level. And I want to make sure that our staff has the ability to be able to do that. So it's not just for the residents, but it's also for the reputation that we hold as a city and a park. I think it's an important project.
I think you're absolutely right. And to that activation, that's something I think that we can work with staff. We may have to create a few events ourselves just to lead people to the water, lead people to the splash pad, lead them to that park. But if we do that and we can do some things on site that expose that park to more of the neighborhood over there, we can put out a mailer piece to the immediate area. Then they will see that this is there for them. They will, I think, organically start to use that more and more. And that's what we want. We want people to use the parks as we build them for them. Comments?
I think I agree with you that the parks are important, and I think spending this amount of money on that park is appropriate at this juncture. I think we have money that we've already discussed. It's there. We put it there to build an amenity that we can. I mean, let's face it. The amount of new, residents that are going in that area, just south of there, is significant. And to put an improved amenity there should be, sought after. And then as we look at the targeted areas of Builders of Hope and what have you, these small, although 3.58 million as we're talking about is not small. I'm not trying to discount that, but these efforts, push the needle in a positive direction, in my opinion.
And I think the biggest plus I see in this is that we're giving the residents the opportunity and the choice to say, I want this or I don't. I know that oftentimes we hear from residents that they didn't get a voice, that they didn't get an opinion, that they didn't have a vote. So I think most importantly, this gives people their own independent choice. And let's let the residents of Farmers Branch decide.
Well, absolutely. And, I think that's why we go through this process. We have these open discussions. But when we walk out of this room, we decide what we're going to do moving forward. I want all of us to be cheerleaders for what it is that we're moving forward on and be able to communicate that information to residents because, one of the worst things we can do is go through all this, do all this work, and then it doesn't fail because fear of the unknown. Well, we need to alleviate residents' fear. And, I see all of this as being a huge positive for our city and the fact that let's be upfront. It's a tax increase. Yes, you have to state that. But our taxes are not going to go up because of this. And it's important to educate people to that fact. So, unlike another bond that was sold a different way, I want to be very upfront with people, or at least I will, and I'm sure you all will too. So, that's it.
The finance team has those calculations ready for a future discussion, so you'll know the budgetary impact. I would argue this is probably an absence of a tax decrease was the way I would say, because it's debt rolling off that's being replaced. But I believe it was $12 a month for our seniors or $16 for our non-seniors. Tammy has exact numbers that we can get to at a future date. But to show the impact to the budget, we like to translate it into a terminology that all of y'all can resonate with. Are we talking about a cup of coffee a day? Or are we talking about a combo meal per day? And those prices keep changing on us. We like to put it in relatable terms for our residents. But when we ran the numbers, I give credit to Tammy and her team for doing that. I was like, what are we really talking about number wise? And because it means something different to each of us. And I'm also looking at the different exemptions we have. And so we're prepared for those elements as this discussion moves forward, we'll equip you all with that because staff cannot endorse either way. All we can do is educate. But our council, on the other hand, you may choose to approach this however you would like to, and we'll equip you with whatever information you'd like. I will caution that, you know, in Farmers Branch's history, a unified council is a very strong force in a bond election. A divided council is not. And so I'll just give that heads up. It's really important that you all feel comfortable with this discussion.
So thanks for teeing something up in that regard that I'll throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into this. I will be remiss if I don't say something about the demo rebuild. While I understand the ask for the demo rebuild, I would be not doing myself or others justice if we didn't look at how we're addressing demo rebuild and perhaps even retooling it to focus on other areas of the city. I think having a blanket demo rebuild has, over the multi-years and now perhaps decades that we've been doing it, it has incentivized a number of builders, a number of homeowners to come in. I think it's done its work in some areas. I think we need to emphasize some other areas in a different manner. So I want to be clear that I think demo rebuild has its place, but as a blanket from east to west, north to south, I think it needs to change going forward, and really hyper focus on some of these areas. If Builders of Hope is a, you know, an aspect of that, I'm not suggesting we throw it out. I'm just suggesting that we really look at how it is constructed and targeted going forward. So I'm throwing that out there. Others may have a different opinion, but I think it's worthy of us to relook at the aspects of demo rebuild. And look, I represent Brookhaven, and if we were to put a map of how many demo rebuilds are, a predominance of them are going to be there.
Mhm.
Has it done its mission? I think the answer is yes. Does the market need it? In some areas, no, but in some areas, yes. And that's the crux that I'm getting at, that we may not need to have it in all areas, or maybe not have it at the same level as other areas. Maybe it's X amount for area A and Y amount for areas B. That could be discussed at a further time, but I'm simply throwing that out there, that we really, as a council and as a community, need to look at that, because I think it's done its job, and we need to make sure that we spend our money wisely and allow business to be business going forward.
Why don't we put that on upcoming study session to have further discussion on that? I would agree. I think we do need to have more discussion about that. And, I'm seeing heads nod, so duly noted.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are we ready to move from this to the other portion of this bond?
So I had an exercise looking at all the discussion. What I see is we're okay with the project proposed. There are some operational components like demo rebuild. We're going to look into those. If we're fine with numbers, which I see we are, and the projects, we don't have to go for discussion on and do an exercise that we were planning on to do. Our next steps are going to be town hall, and that's where our next presentation come in. We do plan to bring our bond counsel on January 23rd, and they will speak to us about what we can say and cannot say and where cities stand. They will help us and guide us through those elements.
And Jawaria, on bond counsel, if I may ask you
Mhm.
to reiterate who constitutes bond counsel, so that we clarify that this is not necessarily a party of, you know, I sat years ago on a bond committee, but a bond counsel and a bond committee are two different things. And I think I'm asking for you to clarify what the bond counsel, who it is,
Yep.
and what their goal is. And
So-
you alluded to part of that, but if you could, just for the record, I think.
Yeah, so bond counsel, there are legal advisors, but when we say bond committee, that's committee of our citizens that our council help us pick. And when we're considering different projects where we don't have consensus or we have time and we need to go back and discuss with community, that's where mostly you use citizens committee or bond committee.
So, yeah, this is a pretty simple issuance. So there was really no need to form a bond committee, a committee of citizens for this. But it is worth noting, it's not cheap to go through this exercise. We pay, I don't even want to ask, but it costs money to have this debt issued.
Yep.
And pretty significant amount of money. So we are heavily invested in the process as it stands right now.
We're getting there, yes. And then Hilltop Securities, I believe, is the ones that will help guide us on this one. Great relationship, guiding us. Many of y'all have interacted with Marty before. She'll be here most likely, unless something's changed. But they have a strong relationship with the city and have guided us well in the past. And they wanted to make sure you all as the council completely understand. So a very specialized legal firm to guide us through this to make sure the city's protected.
Thank you. Thank you, Jory. Thank you, Ben.
And with that, our communication department has a really robust plan to engage our Farmers Branch community. And I'm going to leave it with Jeff with that. Instead of covering this slide, he's going to come in and cover our next presentation.
Got to run fast. So here it comes.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you, Joria. Mayor Lynn, Council, Jeff Brady, your Director of Communications. So fun to be here with you tonight. So now the question becomes, how do we communicate to the community? How do we tell them? How do we develop a conversation about this bond proposal and what's coming up on the ballot in May? So the bond election town hall is the first piece of that, the first step of that. So just want to walk you through what we are proposing or what we see as a good way to begin that discussion next month in just a few weeks, as a matter of fact. So the purpose of the meeting of the town hall, of course, is to, I'm going to step out here so I can read a little better, but explain the potential bond election initiatives and solicit input. It's a town hall, so clearly. The date, January 9th, 2024, that's in just a few weeks at 6 p.m. And the location, best location is probably going to be the Branch Connection because the renovation won't have begun by that time. So now the format is going to, what we're proposing is something that'll look very familiar to the budget town hall that we had also at the Branch Connection. So we were all there, so everyone remembers kind of the format. The mayor would open, be at the podium and kind of welcome the crowd and explain the purpose, why we're here, a brief overview or presentation by the mayor, and we would prepare a PowerPoint presentation to go through kind of step by step. Here's what we're proposing, project by project, and also to explain the no tax increase. I think, of course, that's going to be an important piece, and that would probably be the first question on everyone's mind. So I want to explain that as part of the PowerPoint. And then review each proposed bond initiative, each project. And then what seemed to work well at the budget town hall was to have easels or pods in different corners of the room with an appointed subject matter expert, someone from the staff, and then someone from the council also at each easel with a large board, a big board, like 3x5, something big that's easily legible with the key points. And then each council person would kind of take a different bond project to explain it to the people who came up. That would be the breakout group. So yeah, a pod with informational boards for each bond initiative, council member and staff, and then residents can come up and visit with each, on each topic by topic. And that seemed to work well, but this is obviously an opportunity to discuss, this is what we're proposing, but is this what the council feels would be the best way to kind of begin this discussion with the public. And then a closing statement by the mayor to wrap up the meeting. And of course, we want to talk about the communications, but does that seem like, before we go too much further, does that seem like a good process to communicate, to kind of run the town hall? Does that sound appropriate?
Jeff, can you go back to
Yes,
the
sir.
prior slide. I think we would be benefited from a little bit of Q&A directed at from the audience between what you have here as steps 2 and steps 3. I think there will be, I've seen and we've seen collectively, you know, you ask one question, it's, oh, I had that question too, and you get it answered. I would just think that there'd be a time for a few questions that could be asked from the you know, if the mayor's leading that, the mayor, we have plenty of staff and subject matter experts to address the questions.
Yeah, so to that point, I'm thinking that the brief overview is actually done by staff. You all are the experts on this, and rather than me get up there and talk about it, let staff do an overview, then have questions from the audience, then we break out into the breakout groups from there, and then we have a close of the meeting.
With all due respect, and I've certainly been, and others in this room can speak to this with more knowledge than I can, but it's been made very clear to me that the staff can in no way be advocating for.
You're not, yes, I see no advocacy here. I see presentation of information. And again, the staff knows the information better than anybody else, okay? We're not asking them to advocate for or against anything, but I would rather have the facts presented by staff. Then questions can be answered combinationally, if that's a word, between collaboratively, yes, between us and staff.
Jeff, we'll have to guide the discussion and recognize questions that are about the why we're doing this, which would be the council. How we're doing it would be the staff and the mechanics of it. So we'll just have to delineate carefully on those ones. If it's a, why is this important now? That's a council question. How are we going to do it? That's a staff question. So, and
He's right. The why
we'll be there and we can navigate those together, but
Sure.
that'll give all of us opportunities to engage. So if it's a technical question, staff can answer it, but the why questions really need to resonate with our board.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. Just so we're all on the same page about what we can and cannot say as staff. And I'll get to this in just a minute, but regarding the communications, we do intend to live stream. So there will be a Zoom element to this meeting so that we will distribute the Zoom link. And so anyone who wants to watch or even participate from home will be able to do that. So the pre-town hall, how will we get people, how will we raise awareness? How are we going to beat the drums and let people know? Now, keep in mind, today is what? Is the 19th. And we're talking about a meeting on the 9th. And there's holidays in between. So it's a very short runway, but we're all aware of that. But we'll have the traditional platforms. The website is already, we'll have it on our main website with a banner piece announcing the town hall. Branch bulletin, of course, there's 2 branch bulletins between now and then. We can get out all of digital displays, the forecast, the social media, have it on our cable channel. And this is what I was referring to just now. During the town hall, we will live stream. And so we will make sure people know that they have that link and they can connect with us, just as many people did. Actually, we had about 24 people who participated, some council members and some citizens on the West Side Odor meeting, and that seemed to work pretty well. So it would be a similar format. So people would be able to participate from home. They could, raise their hand digitally. We'd recognize them. They could ask a question during the meeting and then have council and or staff answer it. So that hopefully will boost our participation. And then we'll, of course, record the video and have it for replay for people who are not able to attend. Community input, there's a lot of channels we can use. Now, this would be primarily after the town hall and then moving forward in the spring to the election, toward the election. But in terms of eliciting input about kind of how people feel about each of the initiatives, we'll have FAQs on the website that we're developing now. It'll be not a separate website, but a separate couple of pages on our main website. Details on each bond, proposed bond initiative, details on the tax impact or lack thereof. embedded video from the town hall, of course, and then a Polco survey. That's an important tool also that we can use to get people's feedback, and we can, dial in those questions with direction from council to get feedback on each of the bond initiatives on how people feel about it.
Yeah, any reason why we couldn't have additional town hall meetings after January? I mean, maybe we had a mini meeting at Fire Station 2, or, on such and such date, or some other place, just smaller, but still communicating information for those who are interested or may not have been able to attend for one reason or another.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we can do that. And I think for the last budget cycle, there were smaller town halls. Is that right, Ben? Do you recall?
For the last bond?
The last bond, yeah. the
Yeah,
last
we
bond.
can adapt and pivot as you all need. If each of you'd like to speak to your constituents on your own, we did that in the past as well. It's smaller attendance, but it's a more intimate setting where you can have those more personal conversations. We're here for whatever council would like to do. So you tell us, as it'll probably evolve as the conversations move on. We're flexible and we're ready.
Well, I'm thinking as we get into spring, okay, maybe March, April, even though the election's in May, we can still have these, maybe a couple of meetings at least. People want to come out, maybe we'll have some ice cream or whatever, and
helps.
just make it a little social event to help. And we're there to answer questions.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
We'll
And
work on
then, and again, seeking community input, determine a time frame for, when it's best to have this input as we step into the election season. Paid post on Facebook and Instagram to direct people to the webpage, all social media, city media channels, boards and materials at the library. We'll have handout information that certainly can be available. QR codes and the URL to direct people to the Polco survey so that all of us can kind of see and anticipate what the turnout of the election might be and what people are saying about all these proposals. And we've already developed a specific e-address, so we'll be able to get that out there so people can email questions if they prefer to do it that way. Couple of specific topics for consideration for the town hall, and this is kind of granular and logistical, but I wanted to ask if the mayor wanted to present everything, or council members, or we want to have staff actually go through the slides step by step and kind of present. Is that the direction? Does that make the most sense to walk through the
Yeah,
slides?
I think,
And my anticipation too was we'd have a slide, at least one for each bond proposal. Say, this is what this one is all about with some key bullet points. Maybe a slide about the no tax impact, the no impact on your current taxes. And then I don't know if we want to have a slide on what happened the last time, like the last bond proposal and what happened there for some people who might be interested or might remember. Don't want to get lost in the weeds, but sometimes historical context helps.
So Jeff, I think that I want to make sure I'm clear on something you just said, that there's a slide or two on each bond proposal. We're
Yes.
talking about
Each project.
each project.
Yes.
Right, that's what I want to make sure we're
Yes.
clear on, so that people get it. Because
Once
like us tonight, we need a visual of the Valwood trails and
Squire Park.
and Squire Park and,
Right.
and those things. Pictures will certainly help people to kind of,
See,
understand what we're trying to
Absolutely.
accomplish.
yeah, so we'll have, I misspoke, that's right. So a slide on each proposal, and then we'd also have a big and large board at each easel around the
Right.
room.
Right.
So, also, what about food? Do we want to have food? Is that food something that's important for us to have at a town hall? Is that necessary? Need to go down that road?
It's January, I just recommend some coffee and cocoa, cookies, just to be nice, but
Okay.
minor.
I would make it very light if you're going to do
Yeah.
it.
Right.
I'm not sure that
Less is more. Less is more. So we'll have one mic at the podium, then a mic in the audience afterwards for people who want to ask questions. Then maybe take a few questions. What I'm hearing is maybe take a few questions from the group, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and then direct people for more specific questions, targeted questions to go to each of the pods.
Yeah.
So
And we can
because
decide later who's where.
because this is going to be webcast live, we're going to have one microphone for people to come up and ask questions so they're on camera and we're hearing, because it's sometimes it's difficult running a microphone throughout the room and trying to get to people before they've already asked their question.
That's a great question. So we can do it that way. We can have one mic in the center for people to come.
Let's
up and ask
have them walk
questions.
up and ask their question.
Okay.
I don't want to take questions from people sitting out in the audience, too hard to hear,
Right.
whatnot. Please, walk up, ask your question.
Yep.
That's,
So as we talk about logistics, Jeff, and you bring up a great question, I think at the conclusion of what we had from the presentation in step one, or the original discussion, we have the overview, and then you break to the Q&A at the individual boards. Is that where the Zoom stops? I mean, because I don't think you'd have the Zoom continue.
It would have
I
to.
think we need to clarify, you know, that the Zoom would stop at that particular point.
good point. So an announcement needs to be made.
So-
So if any Zoomers have questions, they need to ask them like right then and now before we cut off the,
And we'll make sure they know that there's an email. They can submit questions later via email. We can certainly respond that way.
Correct.
If they prefer to do it that
Yes,
way.
I think it's super important that you bind that logistical, you know,
Yes.
constraint in the earlier portions of the communication.
That's a good point. Yeah, because once we break out into groups, there's no way that people online
It's
can
done.
follow. It's done. For them, it's done.
For them.
Exactly. Okay. Are there any other questions? No?
any other meetings that we do after this can be a little more informal, just gatherings, if you will. But I think it's important that we have a couple more at least and try to touch more people.
Especially since you want it to pass.
Well, and keep in mind, this will be right after the holidays, January 9th, so people will just be, in some cases, getting back into a normal post-holiday routine. So, okay, well, thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you. Sort of covered B2.
That was B2, yes.
Okay. All righty. Does anybody have anything else, any general comments, anything that they'd like to talk about? Seeing none. Okay, well, I guess we will, let me just thank everybody for their participation tonight. Thank you for tuning in if you did online. And we will adjourn this at 7:37. Thank you.